Okay, so welcome everyone. I'm Michelle Langlays. I'm the co-chair of Women United with United Way Northwest Vermont. Welcome. I've been a part of Women's United since its conception, 6 years ago, and we appreciate you coming. This is our second event here in Franklin County, and we're excited to host you all. So I wanted to share a little bit about who Women United is and what we do and why we're here. And for those of you who are attending your first event, I wanted to share that with you. In bold yet simple terms, we're a powerhouse of diverse, caring women working to create change. Everyone can fill in and grab a seat wherever they want to feel comfortable. We are limited, so I apologize for that. As a group, we direct our effort and energy toward helping women achieve financial stability. We do this with the support and expertise of United Way of Northwest Vermont. We organize, we educate, we raise funds. As a woman, professional, and a mother, this seems like a typical day, but let me tell you, as a group, it's pretty powerful to witness how effective women can be at accomplishing things when we work together. I wanted to acknowledge some of our generous sponsors for this evening. We wouldn't have this evening without the following support, and bear with me because there's a lot, and some of them I don't want to mess up their names. So for the generation on sponsorship from the University of Vermont Medical Center, Hickok and Borbin Financial Planning, Northwestern Vermont Medical Center, the University of Vermont, Westport Hospitality, Mutual of America, Northfield Savings Bank, and thank you to 14 Star Brewery and Jeff's Catering for hosting the event this evening. I also wanted to thank the ever-willing, smiling, and able staff at United Way, especially Nina. Nina is on board first year this year with us, and she's doing a great job, and we're happy to have her. So thank you. So before we get started with this evening, we wanted to kick off the event by showing you the 2018 United Way campaign. It also shares the story of another woman working in Vermont who has access to Working Bridges resources through her employer. And one of the items that we talk with council members, I'm kind of going to go off track a little bit, is, what's your why? Why are you a part of Women United? Why are you a part of the United Way? And my personal why is I'm a daughter of a single immigrant mother who grew up in a agricultural community not too far from here, and I was extremely limited to transportation, healthcare, rides. It was always like, well, who wanted to bring Michelle home because we live so far away. So I'm first and foremost very aware of the struggles that some individuals have in this community and then in the community that I grew up in right down the road. So that's my why. And my mother was always so proud. She would never ask for help. She felt alone. And so part of my mission is to make sure that women and families know that they're not alone, and if I can help by being a part of Women United, and certainly United Way of Northwest Vermont, that's one of my passions and why I'm here. So I'd encourage you to think about what your why is. If you want to get more involved with Women United, please feel free to approach myself or Jet. Jet is our co-chair, the other co-chair. There's always an open seat at our table. We're very forward-thinking, I'd like to think, and very welcoming. So without further ado, here's the United Way of Northwest campaign, the video.
Northwest Vermont. We're working to change this by partnering with employers to help workers with common barriers to keeping jobs and advancing. It's called Working Bridges. Meet Melissa. This is her Working Bridges story.
My name is Melissa Corbacero, and I work at Food Science Corporation. When I was growing up, my mom stayed home and she took care of the kids while my dad went out and worked. And we had one car. We certainly were not silver spooned. And I've always had to work for everything I have. But I don't think I have it any other way, so. When I first left my husband, I had to take my children and walk them to school every day. I ended up on welfare. I was going to use it as a stepping stone. I was not going to be a welfare mom forever. This is my ritual. Yep. I come in, I punch in, I fill up my cup of ice. I first heard about Working Bridges through the Vermont Human Resource Association conference, and every year I would hear how this program had helped their employees.
employees. I brought it back to food science because we were losing people due to these outside stressors. It really helped with those emergencies people had with cars, and the other one is childcare, affordable childcare. Childcare is so expensive to, fuel this winter for heat from a broken furnace and all of those stressors.
I definitely like jobs where I'm physically doing something. I have a very fast pace. I don't know how to be slow.
Yeah, it would really be rough without her. When she's out on vacation, you can definitely tell.
Working Bridges is an employer collaborative focused on developing innovative workplace strategies. One strategy is shared resource coordinators like Connie, who come on site to help connect employees with community resources to overcome life's unexpected challenges. I'm here today.
So we use many services from Working Bridges, from the resource coordinator to the income tax preparation, the income advance loans, and the financial education.
Thank you. But I'm the type of person that if I put my mind to something, I make it happen. I'm really working hard to get myself out of debt. So for Working Bridges, I took a course. It was a financial workshop. Through that course, I was able to increase my credit score by nearly 40 points.
As a business leader, there's many advantages to having Working Bridges on site for us. Working Bridges is helping to support our employees in the challenges and the needs they have every day that we are not necessarily able to help them with. So they can come into work and not be distracted by what might be causing them stress on the home front.
So when I get out of work, I'm going to go to the daycare and I'm going to pick my granddaughter. Her name is Raven. Typically call her Peanut. I'm an adult and I'd like to have a savings. I'd like to have a rainy day fund. Sometimes I think I'm going to have to work the rest of my life. And I really don't want to do that. I want to be able to enjoy my family and I want to be able to have the energy to keep up with my grandkids. I want to be that fun grandma, the fun me mom. I don't want to be the me mom that's in the rocking chair, letting you over for dinner.
Keeping talented, qualified, capable employees is really important. And so through Working Bridges, it really complements what we're doing to build and sustain the workforce in Vermont, which is so instrumental to our success.
My health, my family, all mean the world to me. I feel very rich as far as family goes. I might not be a rich person money-wise, but I'm rich in family.
Working Bridges resource coordinators assist more than 1,250 employees annually with a wide range of resources related to housing, finances, transportation, income supports, and childcare. Along with a coalition of 10 participating local employers, we're changing outcomes for workers in Northwest Vermont. But we need your help to continue this work. Please give. Or go online and visit unitedwaynwvt.org to learn more.
Pretty nice, huh? Hi, I'm Molly Lambert, and tonight I get to join all of you in a great conversation about the challenges that I'm sure many of you experience in your day-to-day work life. I'm introducing myself only by name. You can read about me in the program. It's great stuff. But I want to say for tonight, I'm a mom. I'm a full-time mom. I'm a full-time wife. And I was a part-time student and a full-time worker. And I get what's being said in this video. There are many, many hurdles we need to overcome as we put our days together and give our very best to our workplace and our family and our other obligations. So I want to thank you for being here, because I understand how precious this time is to each of you. And we want to make the best use of it. So there are three things that we're trying to gain this evening. One is we want to enrich this conversation about workforce challenges. Two is we want this conversation to continue. We invite you to take it to your workplaces, to have discussions with your colleagues and your staff and your CEOs and your managers, or if you are a CEO, with your staffers. And thirdly, we want you to be aware of Women United. As Michelle just said, we're an affiliate group of United Way, and we are solidly behind supporting the mitigation of these issues that make successful working a very difficult task for many of you. So here's a little background on how we got to tonight. We, the town of Swanton, received a regional planning grant from our Regional Planning Commission. And with the enthusiastic and very intelligent coordination of Kathy Lavoie, who's here this evening, and our Community and Economic Development Director from Swanton, Swanton hosted a forum for CEOs that came out of a CEO roundtable that Kathy had been engaged in hosting for several months. So in October, we hosted that roundtable. The room was packed because not only do you want to be successful staffers, your employer wants you to be successful partners in the work that you're doing. And in order for you to be successful partners, you have to be happy, healthy, productive individuals. So this forum focused on 4 significant issues that had been outlined by surveys conducted by the Department of Labor. What else, Kathy? Who else contributed to the data?
There were various, but a lot of it was based upon my one-on-one work with individuals.
Okay. At any rate, there were 4 very significant issues, and Kathy is fond of dubbing them as the formidable 4. So if this helps you remember when you go back and have these discussions with your colleagues, the formidable 4 are housing, affordable housing, access to quality and affordable childcare, substance use disorder, and reliable, affordable, and accessible transportation. Those are the formidable 4. And the good news is that we have some folks here who are deeply engaged in those areas of work. And that's great. But tonight, you are the main players in this conversation. It's your experiences. It's your response to what you've already heard. And then you're going to have an opportunity to observe that, kind of that fishbowl exercise. I'm sure many of you have partaken in that kind of discussion before, trying to shake it up from the usual panel format. But at any rate, our conversation leaders, we're not even calling them panelists, our conversation leaders are going to be sitting right here. They're going to give you a brief intro about what they do and how they do it, but brief. And then they're going to have a conversation among themselves, which I'm going to ask you, though, to be quiet observers, but not passive in your observation. Want you to have those questions ready to go the minute they're through. But before we get to them, how about just 5 minutes of hand raising? What's your experience? How has it been for you in the workforce? What should we be focusing on? We want this conversation to be rich, on target, and a valuable use of your time. So, hands up? Hands up? Come on. Well, Margaret, Marilyn.
guess one of the biggest issues for me, and this is more of a parent than personally, is transportation for my daughter, who would like to hold a job down, but the only way she's going to get there is if I drive her back and forth, and I'm not always able to do that.
All right, great issue to bring up, and thank you. Not always focused on the employee, but rather the employee's family. Other thoughts? Yes.
I have sort of the same circumstance. I'm basically, running 2 households because my daughter has 3 kids, and they just can't survive, on her paycheck.
So in the back of the room, I don't know if you heard that, and your name I forgot.
Kathy.
Kathy.
Yep.
Yeah, and Kathy is from Northfield Savings. Thank you for your sponsorship. But at any rate, her point is she's basically running 2 households. And so transportation is a critical issue.
She has a car. It's more, money.
Uh-huh.
She can't survive, and there's no services.
So affordable transportation.
Yeah. Her car breaks down. I'm going to fix it.
Yeah. There you go. Yes.
I would just like to hear more about the approach with children and substance use and abuse. And it's not just say no to drugs anymore, because kids are being introduced to vape pens and edibles and all kinds of things at very, very young ages. My 8th grader was caught with a vaping pen, and then also told us a high schooler gave him an edible cookie last year. And it shocked us, because we have a very open house, and I'm a registered nurse, but it's deeper discussions, and it's catching those children at younger ages so they don't get caught up into that whole cycle.
Okay. Yes. Julia.
Julia, hi. I have 5 children, and ranging from 17 to 10. And I have problems right now with my children wanting to do extracurriculars. I'm not really able to facilitate transportation for all of them, and that's really a very popular topic of conversation in our house.
Thank you.
She has triplets, by the way.
So not only 5 children, but triplets. I don't know if you heard that in the back of the room. But that's a lot. How about one more comment, and then I'm going to invite folks up here.
Hi, I'm Michelle.
Jill. Celia is the daughter.
Yeah, Celia, and she's with the glitter.
All right.
Yeah, so I will say personally, when I went back to school, I ended up requiring to have 3 jobs at the time, in addition to my husband's income. Hi, Celia. Because she was only 9 months old. And in order to finance everything, it was a struggle, and it was literally 60 to 80 hours a week of working on top of school. And I am a nurse, and I had an okay income. For those who don't have those same opportunities, it is an incredible struggle.
Thank you, Jill. I'm going to just speak quickly about what our surveys said among employees, and then I'm going to bring our conversation leaders up here. And thank you, because you have already enriched this conversation. That's really helpful. So 87% of workers in our region responded that access to affordable housing and affordability in general, including food, was a huge, obviously, 87% said it was a intermediate to a major issue for them. 87% said that substance use disorder was a major hurdle for successful employment. 66% said that access to quality, affordable childcare was a major hurdle to successful employment. And then when we talk about transportation, a majority, 54% of the workforce who lives in Franklin County commutes outside the borders of the county to get to their jobs. So with those happy statistics and this very well-informed group of conversation leaders waiting to join us, I'll invite them to come forward. And they're going to sit up here, and as I mentioned to you, they're just going to kind of talk to each other for a little bit. Want you to listen hard, see if if there's any information that sparks you or hits you in a good way. And let me start. I'll introduce them as they're being seated. Margaret Bosick is here in the gray sweater. And Margaret is the Director of Asset Management and Special Initiatives for Champlain Housing Trust. And Margaret has the small job of managing 2,300 rental units that Champlain Housing Trust has throughout their service area. I think the great part to know about Margaret is her passion around her job is created because she thinks every person has a right to decent, safe, and an affordable place to call home. And that motivates you every day, right? So, and next I want to introduce Lisa Jensen, and Lisa is the Director of Working Bridges, which is a program that I hope you all get excited about when you know that it exists. You saw when those employers were highlighted on the slide, you saw that they were all in Chittenden County right now. But Richard, a CEO from this part of the neighborhood, is very interested about working bridges. He's spoken to Jesse Bridges about it and knows, or didn't know, that the program even existed. So Lisa, above all her other skills, and her wonderful team is here as well. And we have a new staffer from St. Albans who was recently selected, Sarah. So she's going to make a difference in this part of the neighborhood. But at any rate, what they do so well is they build these customized relationships with individual staffers. And they can't do it without the employers inviting them in to work with these individual staffers. So it's a good place to work, but these people are good people to know. So then next, I'm trying to think, we have Chris Lawyer. Chris is the Public Affairs Coordinator with Green Mountain Transit. And Chris has a life with nonprofits. And if you look at his resume, and all these things are in your program, but if you look at his resume, you'll know that he spent his time working just trying to make everyone's life better. And you also learn from speaking with him, he's an ardent believer that affordable, accessible, dependable transit is the linchpin to individual and community health, both physical and economic, right? I think so. And Janet McLaughlin is the interim CEO for Let's Grow Kids. The other CEO for Let's Grow Kids is at home with her brand new growing twins. So Janet has the wonderful responsibility of working with a great group of people who are laser focused on early childhood care and education. Wonderful organization. And then we have Melinda White with us. And Melinda, I haven't read anybody else's, and I'm not going to read what I'm going to say about you, but I want to I want to read your different titles because they're very, very important. Melinda is a recovery coach, and she is a medication assisted treatment care coordinator. Now, to speak with Melinda for 5 minutes is a hope-filled experience. She deals with organizations, certainly, but she deals with families and individuals who are managing the worst struggles that you can imagine with addiction. And Melinda's passion for her work is earnest because she too is a person in long-time recovery. So we are so great, and she's so willing to share her story. I've heard her talk, and it's just absolutely compelling. So looking forward to the conversation among you. And Margaret, I thought we'd start with housing.
Everybody should start with housing.
Well, you know, you and Chris can fight it out. And I would ask you to just pass the microphone back and forth.
So good evening. You know, when we talk about housing being affordable, that probably means something slightly different, perhaps, to each of you. What does that mean? To say that it's affordable. The general definition is that you spend no more than 30% of your gross income on housing and utilities, because in theory that leaves enough left over to pay for childcare and health care and transportation and everything else. That may or may not feel right to you. But there's no question that we have a housing affordability problem in Vermont. Last year, we had the dubious honor of having the 5th largest gap in the country between what people earn and what it costs to be housed. And that's not an anomaly. We bounce around between 3rd and 6th. Part of the problem is supply. A lot of communities have a vacancy rate between 1% and 2%, and that drives up prices. And it makes it really hard when you're doing recruiting when people can't find a home. Another part of the problem is development cost. It's pretty common for a developer to have to charge over $2,000 a month in rent for an apartment just to cover their development costs, and that's really out of reach for a lot of people. So there are programs and models that can help people that are otherwise priced out of the housing market. The problem is they're oversubscribed. For examples, we have a shared equity home for sale right now in Swanton for $108,000. That is the only house we have on the market in Franklin County. The tax credit program is a great federal program, and it's supposed to make rent affordable for workforce housing. So rents for a 2-bedroom might run between $950 and $1,240 a month. We have 60 households right now on our tax credit wait list in and around St. Albans. For people that can't afford tax credit rents, there are subsidy programs like Section 8, which serves 25% of the people who are eligible and often has wait lists with hundreds of households on it. And the local program here that can help people pay back rent and utilities, when you hit a bump in the road, runs out of money every year. So, it's really good for people to know that those programs exist, but we also just have to recognize that they can't always help at the time when help is needed.
Thank you, Margaret. Great. Why don't we go to Chris instead?
So I represent Green Mountain Transit, and we are the public transit provider for Franklin County, Chittenden County, Washington County, parts of Lamoille County, and a little bit in Orange County, and we do service certainly up in Grand Isle County. So we actually touch 6 counties, and there are services up in this region, and we do certainly want to highlight those services tonight. So we run some routes from Alburg into St. Albans and then into Georgia, and then that route comes from Georgia back up to St. Albans. So there is a way to travel from that corridor. We run a Richford commuter, which runs from Richford into St. Albans, and we run the downtown shuttle, which runs from 5:45 to 6:45, 5:45 a.m. to 6:45 p.m., and that serves the downtown core of St. Albans as well as many of the shopping facilities. The end of the line is out at Walmart, and the beginning of the line is at Food City in downtown St. Albans. So those services are very much created and have been modified to serve as many folks as possible. And the two commuter routes very much work to serve the industrial park in St. Albans as well as the industrial park in Georgia with an arrival time before 7 a.m. for shift times. And that is why they depart so early from Richford and why they depart so early from Alburg, because they do have that very, very focused purpose, which is to move folks to their employers. In addition, GMT provides what we call E&D services, so elderly and disabled services. And we also provide non-emergency medical transportation, which are referred to in the industry as Medicaid rides, and those are transporting folks from their homes to medical facilities. So those are the services that we provide in Franklin County, and we'll move on and allow for questions at the end.
All right, Janet.
Sure, thank you for having me. So as Molly said, I'm with Let's Grow Kids, and we are the movement to ensure affordable access to high-quality childcare in Vermont by 2025. It's because we want Vermont to be the best place to raise a family. So not a surprise probably to many of you, right, that Vermont truly does have a childcare crisis right now. We know that 70% of all kids under 6 have all available parents in the labor force. We know that 50% of infants and toddlers don't have access to any regulated childcare at all. There's just not enough spaces. And that 80% of those infants and toddlers lack access to care that's rated as quality. We know that families are paying up to 40% of their income on childcare, right? More than their families, right? Paying more. We know they're paying more than their mortgage, or they're paying 30% on their, 30% for housing, and then trying to figure out how they're paying that additional 40% for childcare. Because tuition can be, especially up here, around $10,000 a year per kid, depending on the age of the kid and the type of the program. And we know that still leaves early educators making, not even livable wages, sometimes poverty level wages. There's a little bit of good news, which is that the quality of childcare that's available in the state of Vermont has really been dramatically increasing over the last 10 years. There's been some good investments in quality, including through Let's Grow Kids and our team of early educators that have been providing supports. But while quality has been improving, capacity has been declining or flat in most areas of the state, and here in Franklin County, it has been declining. It is, in Franklin County is also basically the only area in the state where that's seeing its 0 to 6 population grow faster than the rest of the population. So that squeeze is tighter in Franklin County because Franklin County has also lost some childcare capacity. Right now, there's only, let's see, the exact numbers are, well, the numbers change every day, right? But the numbers are, this piece of paper are 1,279 regulated childcare spaces in Franklin County and 3,636 kids under 6. So, I mean, it's a real challenge, and there's really one primary reason for that, and that is that underinvestment in the system. We know that families with young children really can't afford to pay more, and early educators can't afford to make less. And so it's kind of, we're in this space where the pressure is not taking us in the right direction. And so we're doing a ton of things to try to address that with Let's Grow Kids, but 2 of them are, one is that we have a policy agenda that includes increased tuition assistance for families, increased scholarships and loan repayment support for early educators, and incentives for businesses who support their employees' childcare needs. Another thing that we're doing is providing grants and technical assistance to childcare programs that are starting up, expanding, or working to increase to high quality. And so for an example here in St. Albans is that we've helped provide funding and sort of expert support to from a veteran childcare director to help Heather Garceau start up Almond Blossoms Childcare Center, which opened this fall and is offering first shift and second shift care, and is working on trying to figure out how to offer third shift care as well.
Thanks. So Lisa, you have the microphone.
Oh, sure. Good evening. So as Molly introduced Working Bridges, and as you saw in the video, really the mission of Working Bridges is and encompasses a group, a network of employers who want to introduce new policies and practices in the workplace to support their employees with all of those life resources and needs that bubble up. And the foundation of Working Bridges is resource coordination. And as you saw in the video, the role of the resource coordinator in a workplace is we are there on site once a week. We build relationships with employees. We're available to employees one-on-one who have questions about resources in the community. There are phenomenal resources in the communities, and sometimes employees don't know that they're there. Sometimes they don't know how to access them. They don't have the time, or perhaps they've had an experience in the past and it didn't go as well as maybe it should have, and so or perhaps regulations have changed and eligibility has changed. So our role is to be that connector. So employees are connected. We're able to elevate those resources in our community so that those employees can be at work, be productive, advance, and the employer is such an integral part of Working Bridges. With this network, we have employers that will come together around a table and innovate. We have Connie Beal as our Innovation and Training Manager. And so employers are talking with us and to each other about what's getting in the way with their workforce and how can three employers come together and solve a problem around short-term transportation. And can we make that connection to a community partner who has the service in place that can perhaps answer that short-term transportation problem. So the heart of Working Bridges is really, again, that network of employers, the resource coordination, listening to employers about what is it about their workforce, and how can we use the workplace as a platform to support employees with their job retention and advancement. And I also want to add that we, in partnership with Vermont Technical College, we also provide resource coordination to a really innovative grant, Strengthening Working Families Initiative. And we provide resource coordination to students that are getting training and education in readiness to work in manufacturers. So, yeah, thank you.
Thank you. And Melinda.
Great, thank you. I'm glad I was last because Molly got me almost emotional with that introduction. It's humbling, and I am, as she said, a person in long-term recovery, so that's definitely the first reason why I'm here. And being a person in long-term recovery, I was one of those people that had multiple arrests and multiple treatment centers, and everybody kind of giving up hope, and yet there were resources available and people out there to love me back into recovery. So a lot of times people ask me, how do you stay successful in recovery? How'd you do it? For me, it's relationship. More than it's science and medicine and anything else, it's relationship. And lots of times just extending acts of love can be what a person needs to feel like they're valuable enough to get treatment and get into recovery. So, of course, being a person in recovery, I know my purpose in life and why my life was spared with the overdoses and the drama and the craziness is that now I really understand where addiction takes a person, and I can relate to the people that are brought to me. So when it gets to what I've done for work, I recently was part of a grant. It was a federal SAMHSA grant that ended in October of last year, and I am with Northwestern Medical Center. That's where I was stationed for this grant. And the grant gave me a lot of good insight on what the barriers are for people to become successful in treatment and recovery. So the funding for the grant was money that came to put attention into the opioid endemic, as I like to call it, and to figure out how we can get people better access. So there were excessive waiting lists when this grant had started. Sometimes people needed help and they had to wait 6 months, a year and a half, 2 years. You just really never knew. The beautiful thing is that over the course of time, there was a big push on that, and now people can access treatment quite rapidly. But there's still, we could use more. That being said, there can be a misconception too that treatment means needing a specific medicine. The medicine is not the treatment. The medicine is giving somebody the ability to be somewhat balanced in their being so they can focus on the treatment, which is addressing the underlying issue. So with that grant, when I had people on wait list who don't know what they're going to do in the meantime, we have resources like the Turning Point, which I was very blessed to work there before I started working with Northwestern Medical Center. And at the Turning Point Recovery Center, there's 12 recovery centers in the state of Vermont right now. They do get some ADAP funding. There's the Vermont Recovery Network, which is an umbrella over them and has this, so that way they do have some consistency with some of the groups. But basically what it boils down to is a place where people can go and meet peers in recovery. I can say as a person that in the beginning of my journey, it was difficult for somebody to have credibility in my eyes. So it's almost like I needed to hear them say, hey, I've been arrested, I've been on drugs, I've done X, Y, and Z before my ears would open. And it's not that I wanted to be that way. There's just something about feeling like you're less than, well, they're going to judge me, I can't be honest. So having a fellow that's in recovery that can not bat an eyelash and say, oh yeah, I did that too, I get it. You realize that somebody gets what it is that you need. And at the end of the day, it's really just to be heard. This morning we had our MAT grand rounds and we spoke about the motivational interviewing. The reason it's so effective is because it entices the person to open up, and we're just the listeners. And that's all a person really needs in the beginning, is just to know somebody is there and they actually care, and they're not going to tell me what to do. They're going to let me make my decision, and it's just trying to meet the person where they're at. And I love being in the community, working with treatment and recovery, because in a lot of the training that I did, because the field's still somewhat new to me. This isn't what I grew up doing. I was always in corporate. So meet people where they're at, Northwestern Medical Center has been amazing because they let me do that. There are some times that I can't expect a person to come to the office from this time to this time and that's your option. That's not meeting a person where they're at when they're broken and their family is busted and they need some help. So by working under that grant, I had 218 people that I followed. Some of them ended up in treatment, some went an abstinent route, some went on medication, some did inpatient, outpatient, some didn't unfortunately make it. There's 4 people that died. There are some people that are in jail. There's some people that went to jail, came out. So it was all about capturing the information on what helps support a successful completion of a program. And it was access to resources. And we had the same things coming up with the transportation, housing, childcare. So another piece of work that I was able to do was with the governor's OCC, the Opioid Coordination Council. I was on the recovery and the prevention committee. So that gave me a place to be a voice for these 200 some odd people. And I also kept data on it. So we were able to pinpoint more facts on, okay, well, we say there's no transportation. Well, where exactly are they trying to come from, what time, and what does that look like? And, by having that data, submitting it to the state, we've done the proposal to the governor and it's being looked at. And it's like the voices are heard. So being part of this forum, and Kathy Lavoie, I just love you. I just love you. I mean, she is an action person and I love that. So the Formidable Four, when I was at that event in Swan, it's like, thank you, God, that we're able to talk about this openly and start finding ways to solve it. And it starts with, first and foremost, it's building relationship. And then secondly, just having the courage to bust through the fear and give it a try. And if it doesn't work, we pick up and we try something else. So thank you for having me.
So I'm going to ask if you all can just take a breath, and we're going to let these people speak among each other. You've heard they're connecting the dots already in their intros. You could hear that. They're connecting the dots. These challenges, and you all know it better than anybody, are not one-offs. Generally, they are connected. So I'm going to ask each of you, and you've got some information for your conversation as well. You've got some conversation starters that our group has already provided you. If you don't have something that you're comfortable talking about right away or asking each other questions about right away, I'm happy to prompt you. I've got a question prompter in my head, so at any rate, but you may. So the idea is just speak with each other. You're having a conversation, you know? So go, or I'll prompt.
So, Melinda, I have a question for you. I know that there are recovery houses for single adults. I also know that recovery houses for families, as far as I know, really don't exist at this point. Is that true, and do you see that as a missing need?
It's definitely a missing need, and if we're speaking like Franklin County, there is a big gap with recovery homes for families as well as for women. So in Franklin County, we have, the community has Vermont Foundation of Recovery, which is amazing, amazing, beautiful program. And there's a men's home in St. Albans. They house up to, I want to say, 9 guys now. They started in a transitional apartment. And then, of course, we're blessed that we have a local homeless shelter. We have Tim's House, known as Samaritan House. Excuse me. So we work very closely with them. And under this grant, actually, when we spoke earlier, it's exciting to meet you because I hear your name almost weekly. I sit on the housing review team meeting because that's one of the biggest issues. We can give somebody an amazing doctor and psychiatrist and all these things, but if they don't know where they're sleeping that night, they're probably not going to be successful in their recovery. So focusing on the housing is a big piece. There's a huge gap, and it's across the state, with getting more recovery houses, sober houses, halfway houses, like kind of the step down, so people aren't, full on, inpatient residential treatment and having somebody that's able to make their scheduling for them and then just kind of go fly. And good luck with that, but just more that step down of learning how to pay bills, learning how to be in the community, learning how to be accountable to each other. So that's a huge need in Franklin County, especially, is housing for women, housing for family, and we need more housing for men as well. That was a great question.
Janet, are you?
Sure. Yes. Well, I'm as I was listening to Melinda speak, specifically, I was thinking about the discussion that's happening statewide around ACEs, right, adverse childhood experiences, which certainly can include having a parent who's got addiction issues, or it could be a variety of things in terms of domestic violence or other, or even divorce or other things that sort of cause toxic stress. But they talk about the, on the flip side of that, right, is the discussion around strengthening families, around the protective factors. How do we get, what can we do to mitigate the effects of those adverse childhood experiences? In the childcare world, we've part of what we look and see is sort of in the research. It talks about how having one strong, positive adult to child relationship can provide an amazing mitigation against the experience of toxic stress that young children and children of all ages are facing. And so I feel like that's sort of an important role the childcare world can play in this. But it makes me, I'm just sort of curious about whether or not how in your work you guys are using any of sort of that framing around ACEs or strengthening families to sort of tweak your approaches, and also thinking about relative to especially women, I would assume, or parents that are in recovery, sort of how does their thinking about what their young kids need and their potential of being separated from their kids while they're seeking treatment, and then as they're looking for their housing again after that, sort of what's your experience and sort of how that plays in together?
So my experience is, with the grant that I was working under, the people that I was tasked to get were people who had involvement with either DCF or DOC. So I worked very closely with Lund, with DCF, with Economic Services, with Chris, with a slew of people. And we're very aware of ACEs and huge advocates for it. And the nice thing is at Northwestern Medical Center, so I'm in the Comprehensive Pain Clinic, which is despite the name, addiction now. We become 100% addiction treatment. So when I was when I was working with parents, which many of them I still work with, they were being trauma informed. We also want to help them understand some of those whys. Why is it that I don't understand this or don't do this? So ACEs is definitely something that we've been adopting more and more and trying to get more education out around childhood trauma and what that looks like and what the outcome can be. And for us, that's why it's important, like you say, to be informed on what the resources are, because for us, like, I can talk all day long to somebody who has been suicidal, struggling with addiction, in and out of jail, but when it comes to how do I take care of my kids, well, I can't help them with that. I'm not a parent. I chose never to be a parent, but I know exactly who to call. And I think that's the most important part in the community, is to know that I know Beth Crane, she can help me. I know Mary Pay, like that, knowing, for me, if I'm going to refer somebody to an agency or a partner that can help them, I tell them right off, I won't refer you to just an agency that you should contact. I'm going to give you the name and number of somebody that I've personally spoken with, at least one, like the warm handoff, so people will follow through with it, because it's scary. So we are looking at that more and more in our clinic. We're going through the training to be trauma informed, but it's something that we also want to spread. And my hope is that it's going to be something spread around the state. The other thing I love, and I know Beth is familiar with this model, is the Iceland model that is getting more and more attention. And the focus isn't on the trauma or how many drugs somebody's using. The focus is on solution. It's on, let's get engaged in healthy and activities available so people don't even really feel the need to use. So there is a lot of that conversation going on, but I think that the more the better. And what it boils down to is really just connecting with the local community partners. And we've done an amazing job in this county of breaking down silos and being partners all the way, because one organization can't do it all. So.
And so we don't focus a lot on ACEs specifically, but we do try to keep the local connections. So we keep connections with the Lund Home, and we do our community campaigns, which we do annually in the 3 counties where we operate a lot of service. So we donate bus passes because we know that they need them. The Lund Home, the folks who are being served there, need transportation. They're reliant. They are a very dedicated group of transit riders. So we make those connections. We're making the connection right now with Kim's House and the Samaritan House, and they'll be getting bus passes donated. And we're also doing, a fundraiser for them as well. And we've done it for other local organizations here in Franklin County. So we do absolutely, while we don't necessarily do ACEs, we do want to make sure we're incorporating many of the other organizations and making sure that they have the resources available, not only the information, but resources too.
I think concrete support. Those are concrete supports in the time of need, which is one of the things that we need.
So we don't actually do any in-house social service provision, but we train all of our staff who have any interactions with tenants on trauma-informed care, down to our maintenance guys. And that's not always real popular in terms of trying to get them to come. But on the thought that they are most often in people's homes, and when they see things, they can bring it back to our resident services coordinator, who can then try to figure out an appropriate intervention.
And I'll just add that through Working Bridges as resource coordinators, so we work in partnership with employee assistance programs, and that is a wonderful resource for us when employees do share information that they're concerned about. And we, again, can make that, we have that relationship, we have a name, we ask, would you like would you like the name and number? And it's that warm transfer that, again, people follow through, they feel comfortable, they trust whoever is giving them that information. So I have a question though, in terms of, can you share a success story or two of somebody that has become employed, so that you've seen them progress to the point where they're employed, and what contributed to that success in maintaining their employment?
Sure. So I have 2 people that come to mind. I will be quick with one of them because he is now taking a small break from working because he's getting something medical. But otherwise, this guy showed up homeless, jobless, couldn't drive, not in treatment, overweight, unhealthy, broken, like just out of the blue to the clinic and said, somebody told me to come and find you and you would help me. And this guy, and even for me, it's like, I feel like when I look at somebody, I always see what the beautiful outcome can be. And we worked hard for me to even find that. Like, he had so many cards stacked against him, but he had heart and he was willing. So that was approximately, I want to say it was probably 11 months ago. So in that time now, he is in treatment. He's successful in his recovery. He's lost like 50 pounds. He's in college. He is driving. He's got housing because he didn't have housing either. I mean, all of these things, and he was on disability but wants to get back into employment now. He's ready because he realizes that he's healthy enough to be able to be employed. The other person that comes to mind is a young lady who she was unemployable for years, definitely in need of treatment, in need of support. Doesn't have much for family support. So we were introduced, I'd say it's about 2.5 years ago now, and she didn't have the ability to look in the eyes. She had such limited self-esteem that she had all she could do to utter the words to me of needing help or answering questions. As she got in treatment, as she got supported and she got a team around her, she also got connected with peer recovery supports, and then she realized that she was ready to get back into the workforce. She still struggles with transportation, but she has a partner who's healthy and has transportation. And she has been, I remember when she got her, gosh, I could cry over this one. I remember when she got her first job and she asked me if she could put me as a reference, and I was like, absolutely. And it was her first job at a dollar store that was just opening. And she was so excited. And mind you, in the meantime, since she had been in treatment, she had been able to work on her appearance, her presentation. Disclosure is a big one because a lot of people, if they're in treatment or they have criminal records, they don't want to lie, but they don't know what to say. And, we really encourage them not to give out your entire scorecard at the first interview, but just, if you're filling out the resume, have you ever had a felony? Yes, happy to discuss, and leave it at that. Are there any barriers to, people have appointments. They have a lot of appointments in the beginning. So she learned how to be more confident in her stance and in answering, and she got hired. She was blown away and hired on the spot. And I think it was like 3.5 months, and she was immediately put up to assistant manager. She's continued to work without stopping, and she's advanced to a better location where she's working, and it's changed her entire world. So for her, it's not only about like being able to make money, because of course that's needed, but it's getting the esteem of knowing that I'm a hard worker, I'm worth it, I'm employable after not being employed for a while, and being able to carry herself in a way that she realizes that this isn't the end of the line. Like, she can continue to grow in her employment. And it's huge, like with the Formidable Four, because one of our biggest focuses at the clinic is employment. We know how valuable that is for people in recovery, that they need to be employed. And sometimes they struggle with their employer. We teach them how to have those conversations to educate the employer, because most of the time the employers want to work with the individuals, they just don't know how. And it's like, you know what, you're a person in recovery now. You have what it takes to be able to be professional and help them understand a little bit more. And there's so many stories. I sit on the Creative Workforce Solution team too. What a beautiful team of people. And it's like, we will go to any lengths to help connect people to employment, because we know that not only is it valuable for the person in treatment and recovery, but the statistics show that a person who is in treatment and recovery successfully has the earning potential above average, because they're so driven, they're so resilient from the trauma in the past, that they will be the most amazing employees. They just need that break.
So that's a conversation that I'm glad I got to hear. And now I want to invite all of you into this conversation. Earlier, we heard about children, who are being encouraged to vape. We heard about a family, probably a normal family situation. Somebody's struggling. They're trying to run 2 households on one wage. These are the stories that, don't get directly to the resources they need. So I'd love to have you all follow up on what you've heard in this conversation. And many of you are resource providers as well. So would love to hear your questions, and I'll make sure that I don't know that this is going to come to you, but we'll try.
Hi, my name is Tammy, and I just want to say I haven't had kids in childcare in close to, well, a lot of years. And it was really tough then, and it's really dispiriting to hear how tough it remains today. And it's great that we're finding ways to make it more affordable, but the more people who can afford it, it doesn't solve the capacity issue. And I hear you saying, you know, we just opened a center recently, but how do we focus on that? How do we make it a viable business opportunity for Franklin County so that we can, I mean, there's such a need for it. I just can't imagine that it's such a losing proposition still after all these years that someone hasn't figured out how to make this a viable proposition and a win-win for everybody.
Well, yes, so we're working very, very hard on that. There are a few people who are figuring out how to make it work, but they are among the most resourceful people you've ever met. So it's, and they're having to, and so what we're trying to do is try to figure out how do we bring those skills out. I think about, before I worked in early education, I did a lot of work around food security and local food systems. And I think about for early education businesses, a lot of times, right, the people who open those programs, right, they're passionate early educators. They aren't necessarily passionate about running a business. And so it is, so some of it is around, you know, supporting folks in sort of developing their business plan, helping them think through, you know, now, you know, for a childcare business, when you open up a center-based program, not a home-based program, but for a center-based program, right, you're immediately supervising staff. And need to think through their staff development plan. So there's a lot of sort of business related supports that are needed, and a lot of the small business supports that are available throughout the state, they're not really attuned to what the needs are of running a childcare business. In fact, they look at some of the small business advisors will look at the, you know, they look at the financial statements and say, I think you should choose another line of business. But so it's, so some of it is really finding those business supports, also helping a lot of the early educators and the people that own programs, home or center-based programs, they don't recognize that there's other people that are in similar straits that are doing similar things together. So can they form cooperatives? So in Rutland and in the Northeast Kingdom, we've been supporting cooperatives of early education programs to come together so that they can, you know, go in together to get their professional development that they need, so that they can, you know, think through how do they share bookkeeping services. So sort of there's this whole bucket of work around sort of like how do you make it more viable just by increased business practices, but ultimately. There's truly just not enough resources in the system, and it just has to do with the fact that for young families, right, and in wage stagnation that we have, as well as our affordable housing crisis, like there's just not more money for them to pay, and so what it's going to require is some additional public investment in the early education system for us to truly crack this nut, and so that, you know, means that, you know, right now the way that our child care financial assistance program is structured, if you make between $30,000 and, you know, $55,000, you get if your wage increases a little bit, your child care benefit decreases more than that. Mm-hmm. So those families that are in that $30,000 to $55,000 range, they have less resources to pay their bills than families that are making $25,000, which is like really hard to hear when you've worked hard to get yourself to a place where you're making $55,000 a year. So there's so some of it is we definitely need that investment. We need to support early educators in terms of their workforce, in terms of getting the training and skills that they need. The quality number, I mean, the increases that we've seen in terms of the quality care have been dramatic. And actually, so for example, in Franklin County specifically, the number of child care programs that we have at the higher levels within the STARS system, which is the quality recognition program for child care programs, is the same now as it was 5 years ago. So that's great. So the quality programs are staying, but there's not enough new people entering. So that's the challenge. When you look at the home-based childcare programs, it's not that programs are closing at a faster rate than they were before. There's always been people opening and closing home-based childcare programs. It's sort of tied to people's life stage often. But the difference now is that more people are not entering the field. And so we've got a team of really experienced early educators specific to train that are there to help walk people through the process, get them started. We have a grant program that supports people in doing that. We've got more supports to the Vermont Community Loan Fund to do that. So we really are targeting that. But again, it's tricky because there's so much misinformation out there, but really the real issue is that people are not entering in the field, not that people are leaving it faster than they used to.
Other questions, and I don't think that it'll come all the way over there, so just if you would stand, Kelly, right, and just speak loudly.
Thank you. My name's Kelly. I'm here. I'm a Franklin County resident and also sit on the Commission on Women for the state of Vermont. So thank you. This work is so near and dear to my heart. And we just finished a listening project. I'm not sure if some of you have heard of it, but we did listening events all across the state. And I'm just sitting here going, wow, everything we're hearing in our surveys and in our local listening projects is just, the data is clear. We're seeing this systemically. Something I'm curious about as different kind of resource providers is how do you find resources? And this kind of came up, we did a listening project in the Northeast Kingdom. And some said, why don't you just go to Google and people could do a search for help with housing, right? But then you're making an assumption that people have access to the internet, for example. So I'm just wondering how, to somebody who has no understanding of where to go for help, how do you market and get information out there to people so that somebody who's at their lowest point in life can get that help? I'm just curious from your perspective, how do you reach out to different audiences and groups of people?
So, Jesse, I don't know if you want to take just a quick stab at that,
statewide resource that you don't have to have. You can use, computer search to do. You can text to, but you can also call any phone. 211 is a statewide service that all of the United Ways throughout Vermont support, and it's a resource connection tool to, you name it, and they can find a way to connect you to it. And there's lots of good warm handoffs there.
And
real
real
can't plug
people.
Working Bridges enough. So
Real
if you're in a
people
workplace,
answer the phone, right?
What's that?
211.
211 works on the phone. Yeah.
It's
yeah.
a group of people that are trained.
Very highly trained to know where all those resources are. And Connie, raise your hand there. Connie, famously of the video you saw earlier, one of our resource coordinators, used to work for 211.
And next, Hollywood. I work for 211, so it's statewide, 24/7, every day, holidays included. You're going to talk to a live person, and they're community resource specialists, right? That's their work, and they actually are standards around that. So, but Working Bridges actually is similar to that. It's just on wheels. That's the difference. That's all. It's you and Hollywood.
So I would offer that part of it, right, is going to meet people where they are as much as you can. And so, for young children, in their first year of life, Vermont has an excellent rate of all those babies getting to the doctor, which is fantastic. And so, it's making sure that within our medical system and the pediatric system that they really are, screening for the social determinants of health. I sound very wonky up here, but there's, making sure that they're asking the right questions to truly understand what, are the underlying issues that families are facing. So in the pediatrician's office, obviously, I believe early care and learning centers are another place, where, family needs can be identified and addressed. And I assume that, you guys would say the same thing about within housing as well, in terms of meeting people where they're at. So.
And I think also getting information about our resources into places like medical settings, just getting the word out as broadly as possible. And then there are groups that meet once a week around housing. And that's a pretty widespread web of people. So I think the likelihood is that someone's going to come into contact with somebody in that group.
Yeah, your people and I are.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and I guess
it is so hard to reach. It's a tough question. That's something that we talk about, like with the Agency of Human Services, because there's so many different organizations that meet in our everything from partnership meetings to MAT neighborhood meetings. But I think that having an idea of what the need is the starting point. Because I was thinking right off, 211 is an amazing resource, and if assuming somebody has access, to a phone, but also you know, if it's something that has to do with treatment and recovery and substance use, and it's kind of, well, I don't know which place to send them, more and more, especially in Franklin County, organizations are taking a stance at like no wrong door. So we have become so embedded with each other that, like for me, I'm not a mental health clinician, but if there's somebody that I know is going to need mental health treatment, I have NCSS on speed dial and multiple employees of that organization that there's the warm handoff. In our emergency department, who we actually met this afternoon too, with a few other partners, they do screening. They got like the ESPERT screening, which is the screening and brief intervention. They're also coming up on doing one with youth. And by doing those screenings, they're able to do referrals, to any kind of resources too. Like I even asked them today, add the housing on it, because that's a big one. So it's like in our community, I think a lot of the organizations have some good communication. I think it's just amping that up as much as possible. We've got, you know, between the newspapers and the TV shows and all this stuff, that's great too. But I think if there's at least, like, if you contact Northwestern Medical Center, they'll find the person. If you call NCSS, they'll find the person. So contacting the organizations, even if you're not really sure exactly what they do, because it seems like what organizations do changes regularly. And that's good, because life changes regularly. But just contacting them and asking them, I'm with somebody who is in need of treatment and I don't know the first thing about it, what do I do? And then if they send you to us, or the Howard Center, that's a big one. That's our designated agency in this area. Then they can do an assessment, determine, do they need to go to inpatient, to outpatient? Do they need, you know, medicine? Do they need the recovery center? And actually I want to put in a plug for the Turning Point Recovery Center, because they basically are defined as a recovery resource center. That's what they do. So if somebody's coming in, they're in recovery, but they need a job. Well, great. Vogue Rehab goes there, I think, 2 days a week now and does little workshops. There's Vermont Works for Women, who we work with, and they're doing workshops at the Turning Point, at the State Building, at our clinic. So it's like, I think it's just contact the agency, even if you're not really sure what they do, because as a community, we've gotten so much better about being able to say, okay, well, since we don't do it, let me send you to somebody who can.
Right. It's all about connecting the dots, isn't it? Nothing is just by itself. Yes, Kathy.
Regarding the child care, the effect that it has on the workforce now is unquestionable, yes. There's no question about it. And yet, on a personal level, as a mom that worked full-time, sometimes took a little bit of heat for that, went to college almost full-time, and raised 3 kids. I may be the first generation of moms that fought to keep my job in the workplace as a young adult, that will be leaving the workplace early with any knowledge I have, with any assets gone at an earlier age, because I will be taking care of my grandchildren. I'm not complaining, sounds wonderful right about now, but what the impact that will have on the workforce when probably mostly grandmothers will leave the workforce early, long before their time is due, because of childcare, is going to be even more detrimental, I think, than what we're seeing now.
Interesting. I think that's a great point, and I would say that as somebody who, when my husband is in Vermont, he was the native-born Vermonter, and when we moved back here 5 years ago, I always said to folks, well, we have all available parents and all available grandparents in the workforce, you know, and we need them, right? We need Grandy to continue to be the radiology tech of the hospital, and we need, you know, and Grandpa Bruce needs to continue being the accountant at the construction firm. Like, those are jobs that need to be filled here in Vermont. You know, they can't just, it would not be good for our economy if they just stopped working right now. And I've heard from other folks too, where again, somebody who's her kids are a grandmother who's going to leave the workforce because her kids are one is a nurse in a addiction recovery center, and another person is a wastewater engineer, right? Her son-in-law is a wastewater engineer, right? We don't want those people leaving the workforce to take care of their kids either. So I would say employers more and more are recognizing this as a dramatic issue. We've got you know, an active business coalition supporting Let's Grow Kids. The Vermont Business Roundtable has announced childcare as one of its policy priorities for this year. So I think employers are really recognizing that, but I do appreciate you adding that voice to it, because I think people only think about the parents and not about the impact on the grandparents as much.
We have time for one more piece of conversation. Oh, yes.
I was just curious, in terms of the childcare issue, are you finding more employers becoming more family friendly out of necessity? In other words, they're going to lose their employees unless they start to accommodate, either through subsidizing childcare costs or flexible work days, or
Yes.
Are you finding that?
Yes, so we're definitely finding folks, and again, this is one of those things, right, when we're raising this issue with them, they're saying, oh yeah, we absolutely see it affecting our recruitment, our retention, and then they're like, what can we do about it? And right, and they want to figure, right, as business people, they want to figure it out right that instant. And so we have sort of a range of options for them. We're saying these are the things that you could do to support your employees. And a good example, actually, that sort of ties a lot of this together is Vermont Teddy Bear Company, right, which is down off Shelburne Road, off Route 7. They have it's shift work. They have up to a lot of hiring for the holidays, and some of the folks that they hire are folks who are at Lund, who are staying at the Lund Center. Some of those moms, right, they take the bus down Shelburne Road. They drop their kids at a child care center. There's a few different child care centers on Shelburne Road, right? They know that bus schedule so well. Drop their kids off at child care, get back on the bus, continue down to Vermont Teddy Bear. Which, right, sounds kind of good in theory, but right, it was not working for like the shift times that Vermont Teddy Bear had set up. So Vermont Teddy Bear decided that they were going to start letting their employees choose their own shifts, which was like, right, a pretty radical idea for a company like that. But that's what they decided to do, is they just recognized that if they needed workers when they needed workers when they needed workers, but they also needed workers, and like that was the most important thing. And so again, this sort of like net of resources that's allowing that, and having a thoughtful employer, they are able to connect to this job that's a really good stepping stone for them.
And you're finding that among your...
And so it is definitely a topic of conversation. I know there's consideration of, how could we come together as employers and create a shared child care center. That's sort of the big dream. Flexible schedules as much as they can do. Casella, Dana Rellin is piloting a tuition assistance for some of their employees as well. So absolutely, I think employers are they're coming to the table and they want to find a solution.
So I just want to applaud all of you for being such amazing conversationalists. I don't think we wasted 1 minute of your precious time this evening yet. So thank you very, very much, and thank you to all of you. And Marilyn and I are co-chairs of this event, so Marilyn's going to wrap things up for you and get you enthusiastically on your way.
Well, I don't think I have to get anybody enthusiastic about anything in this room. I have to say, I have to use Molly's word of amazing. This was just an amazing, rich conversation tonight. And we all know that the vitality in our workplace, in our homes, in our community, all depends on the work that we are doing together. And I have great hope that in this community, great things are going to happen. I will tell you that I moved back to Franklin County almost 20 years ago, and it's amazing. Again, I'm using Molly's word, and I use that word amazing a lot because I believe the things that are happening all around us in this county, in this state, are just absolutely amazing. And the other really good news, this is not the end of the conversation. Kathy began the conversation in Swanton. Women's United is continuing it. And the United Way is going to continue this conversation with hopes of not just talking about it, but actually coming up with some solutions, getting these things solved for us Because if we want to continue to have a vitality in the workplace, in the home, in the schools, we've got to figure these problems out. And now it's with great pleasure that I introduce to you Bridget White, come on, who is our co-chair of Women's United.
Hi, everyone. Thank you so much for being here. In particular, our thought leaders, conversation leaders, you guys have been great. Obviously, we've talked about, these issues, they exist. Marilyn, were there an opportunity to sign up for the Formidable Four conversations? Is there
a sign-up sheet? And I forget to say the next one is going to be on childcare.
Okay.
And that's going to be in March. And there is a sign-up sheet over here on the table where you can put your name and your email,
right,
so you'll be sure that you're invited to it.
So you can't just escape. No, I'm just kidding. So, if you want to sign up for a focused group and to try to come up with solutions, that would be great. I also want to thank Marilyn and Molly for putting together this great evening. And of course, I will not leave without just a quick little commercial for Women United on our major fundraiser is March 7th. And so March 7th at Higher Ground, that's our major fundraiser. Women United, as Michelle said, everything we do is about advancing financial stability for women and their families. And because of our generous sponsors, this evening, 100% of your ticket sale proceeds goes towards supporting women and families. And we do that through the support of our Working Bridges program. So I heard many times from our conversation leaders talk about we have to meet people where they are. It's exactly what Working Bridges does. So our major fundraiser, March 7th at Higher Ground. Ticket prices are $20, $25 at the door. It's not a thought-provoking thing. It's just a party. So come, please, please, please come. Bring people. There's a live band. It's just a blast. I expect to see you all there. Is there anything else I need to say?
Thank you. Good.
Drive safely. Thank you so much.